And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Welcome to Odd Reality Radio, the show designed to generate thought through entertainment. Join us as we explore the strange and unexplained, the unanswered, and the unbelievable on Odd Reality Radio.
An error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it.
Welcome to Odd Reality Radio. I'm Ty West, and today we talk UFOs, the Great Southwestern Suzuki Adventure, and we even share some exciting news for those of us in and around Utah. Because today we sit down with photographer Nathan Kalishaw and discuss a few of his personal experiences with UFOs, as well as a couple of projects that he's currently working on. Stay tuned. You're listening to Odd Reality Radio. Now, before we get into today's show, I'd like to send out a couple of shout-outs to people who have sent some feedback in. Katrina, thank you very much for those links. I definitely want to do a show about that area. I just feel a little pressure because you live in the area, so I want to do the show justice. So I'm not saying it's not coming, I'm just saying it may take a little while. And Wally, thank you very much for your emails as well as the review on iTunes. It really does help us out more than just about anywhere else as far as exposure and getting new listeners. So if you would, please rate and review the show on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you may get the show. It helps a ton. So without further ado, let's get into today's interview with Nathan Kalishaw. We're here with Nathan Kalishaw. How's it going, Nathan?
It's going pretty good. I was just checking out my Kickstarter project, and right when we started here, I just noticed I got a $150 backer just now.
Well, hey, it's good luck. That's good luck.
Yeah, we're in the final run of the Kickstarter. We're about 86% funded now. 86.5% funded to be exact.
Well, tell us a little bit about this, the Great Southwestern Suzuki Adventure. What is it exactly?
The reason why it has Suzuki in the name is because I'm going to be camping and living out of a Suzuki Vitara. It's a year 2000 model, and it's a four-banger, which means it's got great gas mileage, and I have four-wheel drive. And I didn't get a Samurai because they're just not they're not the best vehicles, even though I really like them, but for like road tripping, it's not good enough. And I needed something for off-road because
Right.
I plan on going to several UFO hotspots and other places, that are kind of tied to Southwestern folklore or the lore of the Southwest or the history of the Southwest. And so I needed something that was going to take me off the beaten path a little bit, but would also get good gas mileage. So I actually purchased this vehicle for this project.
That's awesome. Well, what exactly inspired this trip?
I've been working as a photographer to cover every major area of the Southwest for about 15 years now. I worked as a wilderness guide out on the Arizona Strip, down in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I lived out there for like off and on for about 3 years. Out on it's a place known as the Arizona Strip in the northwest corner of Arizona, and a lot of people don't know about it. And a lot of people in Arizona don't know about it because it's the very furthest northwest corner of the state, which is cut off from the rest of the state by the Grand Canyon. National Geographic actually called it the Tibet of the Americas simply because it was so sparsely populated. So I gave tours out there, lived out there. I would come home to Utah on the weekends, but I was living out there like 5 days a week. So I was inside the Parashant National Monument as well as Grand Canyon. So I've been down the river, down the Colorado River, down inside Grand Canyon. Worked for Arizona River Runners for a little bit. And so, later on I went to do Grand Circle tours where I gave, took people from all over the world, all over the Grand Circle. So I was pretty much a traveler, and that line of work usually paid most of my travels and stuff. But whenever I can, I break away and I try to do a lot of these trips as a photographer. I'm mostly a documentarian. So this is kind of like a way to finish up, covering all the major areas of the desert Southwest. So one place I have not been able to cover extensively is both Southern California as well as Texas. And I want to also cover more of the borderlands between the United States and Mexico. And on this trip, I'm going to be covering the U.S. side of the border, but I will be pretty close in several areas to the Mexican border.
Now, I've seen some of your photography, and it's incredible. You have an excellent perspective and a really unique style. When it comes to, you mentioned UFOs, and obviously Odd Reality Radio is a fringe radio show. Have you ever seen a UFO yourself?
For the longest time, I believed in UFOs without ever having seen one. I grew up going out in the hills with my grandfather. He was a prospector and a miner. Our family had a mining company. And so I've grown up going out in the hills and going out to places with my grandfather like Grand Staircase National Monument and places like that. And I'd never really seen anything strange in the sky until this past year and a half.
Really?
So I've had two different close encounter sightings, one in southern Nevada and one actually in Dulce, New Mexico.
You're kidding.
Nope.
That's incredible. And I'm a bit taken back by you actually saying that you've never seen anything until just recently, because I started this show with a friend of mine it was, I think June 1st was of 2014 when we started the show, and I've been looking into all kinds of paranormal for almost 3 years now, and never really seen anything. I've had a couple ghost encounters and stuff like that, but never had the UFO experience that I've always wanted. And we went out to Dugway right after recording and releasing our very first episode, which wasn't necessarily UFO related. It was on Centralia, Pennsylvania, the town that's with the burning underground coal mines. But we went out to Dugway, and after about 6 hours of sitting there with nothing going on and cloud cover and not, we actually spotted our very first UFO for the both of us who... I mean, we've been interested in UFOs and all of that, hoping to see something our whole lives, but never have until that moment. So
never having the opportunity, right?
Exactly, and it was great.
But you did see one.
We did. It was incredible. It looked like it started out. It appeared like it was a star. It was just next to the rest of them, looked just like the rest of them. But the weird thing is it began to slip as if it was dropping from the sky. And then it became, it went at a diagonal shape and then kind of zigzagged back up to near its original position and then just zipped off out of sight. and we both saw it, and we didn't say a whole lot until after it was gone, but then, I mean, we were both jumping up and down. It was kind of an exciting experience, to say the least.
Kind of a lot to take in, huh?
Absolutely, and it's something I want to experience again, definitely. And this sounds like a project where you're most likely going to run into a potential of another UFO sighting once or twice, hopefully.
That's right. Okay, this allows me to walk around a little bit more freely. Anyways, if you want to hear my story, I can tell you 2 different stories here.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, I actually have 3 stories to tell. If this is good for your program.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I actually have a long history tied to this phenomenon, and I didn't realize it for the longest time. And I went down to UFO Congress in Fountain Hills, Arizona. I was the event photographer for one of the event photographers for Open Minds TV down there.
Excellent.
And it was my first actual ever UFO convention. I've never been to one of these. And so it was a little bit of a culture shock because I met so many people that I guess mainstream normal communities would mark as outlandish or crazy, right?
Yes.
So I took a little getting used to, because I've been born and raised a Mormon in a Mormon community, and so it was quite different for someone like me entering a world like that. But my actual ties to this phenomenon wasn't born out of an interest in the subject initially. I grew up having, I would say, between the years of my earliest childhood onwards to 6 or 7, I actually had strange dreams involving beings that I would say, were the Greys or the classic gray alien or whatever.
Right.
So I had these dreams, and they stopped probably when I was around 8 years old, 7 or 8. And I just remember these dreams being kind of like sort of nightmares. At the time, I didn't know what a UFO was. I didn't know what an alien gray was. I didn't know anything about that stuff. And to be honest with you, when I was like 11, 12 years old, I didn't even know what a UFO was. I had to ask someone what that was when I had heard of it. I didn't even know. I didn't put flying saucers and UFOs to be in spaceships or anything like that. I guess I was kind of sheltered, right?
Right.
So I never really got any kind of real exposure to that and stuff. And I was born to a single. At 5 years old, my parents got divorced, and I lived with a single mom until I was about 12. She remarried, and there was they were on their honeymoon, and they sent me and my brother down to stay with my grandparents in southern Utah for about 3 weeks.
Okay.
And back then, my family and I, we were poor. We weren't very rich. And so we didn't have luxuries like cable TV or a television. And so when I came down to my grandparents' house, they had everything. They had the Discovery Channel. They had HBO. They had everything.
I can relate. I was in a similar situation with that.
Yeah, and it was like amazing for a kid like me who'd never been exposed to that much television. I was watching all sorts of programs, and I didn't realize this at the time, but my grandpa was pretty steeped up into ufology. He was really interested in the UFO phenomenon. And I remember just laying on my grandpa's bed with him one night, and we were watching a UFO documentary. And I just remember all these memories flooding back in from these dreams when I saw this one documentary. And I kind of put 2 and 2 together then, and it was like, whoa. And so, I haven't had those kind of dreams ever since childhood. It's just one of those things I remember having. And so most of my life, I don't remember anything else related to that except for some of these childhood memories. And 12 onwards, I was going out in the hills with my grandfather, and I never really seen anything in the skies either. I've grown up most of my life in southern Utah, you know, and going out in the hills with my granddad, and you know, I've worked on some ranches. I've herded sheep. Was a prospector. I helped my grandpa mine because he had this mining company, and so, you know, I never really knew for sure whether UFOs existed or not. I just had this feeling that whatever was out there, it was here. You know, it was real.
Right.
It wasn't just some phenomenon. It was actually a real thing that we're dealing with here. And I always wanted to see one of those actual flying saucers, like the kind of chrome-colored flying saucers that you would see during the day. But even until now, I still haven't seen that kind of flying saucer yet. It's always been kind of a desire of mine to see something like that. Maybe something up close and personal, kind of like what Billy Meyer. You've heard of Billy Meyer, right?
Yes.
Okay, something like Billy Meyer may have witnessed. I've always wanted to see something classic like that, or what Bob Lazar describes what he witnessed out at S4 near Area 51 in southern Nevada. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I can say right now, about 2 years ago, I didn't have near as much knowledge about this subject as I do now. And I don't know if you remember watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where Richard Dreyfuss had this experience, and it kind of made him obsessive.
Yes.
Until he discovered the truth, right?
Yes.
I have had a very similar experience in real life, to say the least. So my first sighting started in December of 2013. It was December. There's actual footage that I captured on YouTube. It doesn't do justice to what we saw.
It never does. It never does.
No. But the night before, we were actually scheduled to go to Horseshoe Bend in Page, Arizona. I was going to go down there to photograph it with a friend of mine who goes to Southern Utah University. He's actually he's kind of an amateur photographer, and he's been kind of an apprentice of mine. But I was doing a little training with him, and we were going to go to Horseshoe Bend, which is in the complete opposite direction. But on this one winter night, it was like a Friday night, I went to bed early that evening, and I remember it snowing that evening, and I went to sleep, and I had the strangest dream that I can remember in recent memory. It was a dream where I was actually on a table in what felt like and looked like a spaceship in the stream.
Incredible.
And it's weird because I could hear what sounded like a very massive engine in the spaceship. It was like a big type spaceship. I would say like a 60 or 70 foot flying saucer or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It just seemed really big. But it was like sleep paralysis. I don't know how else to describe it. It was just a sleep paralysis episode because it wasn't reality.
Now, when you say that the sound of these engines, is it something that you could relate to maybe a jet engine or maybe just a larger car engine, or can you describe that any better?
Like something out of Star Wars or Star Trek.
Okay.
I don't know how else to describe it. But I was on this thing, and I was strapped to the table where I couldn't move. And I remember getting up off this table and like walking through this wherever I was. And at that time, my roommates, I was living with a couple roommates in this upstairs apartment, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. My roommates watched me walk out of the house and out into the street, and I woke up with snow falling on me out in the street. And that was like the weirdest experience, because as I was waking up from this dream, I found myself out in the street, and I could hear this engine from whatever it was, the ship was, but the noise, it seemed more like what you would call an auditory hallucination.
Okay. Yeah.
And it started to fade as I was waking up and realizing that I had walked outside of my sleep, and started to fade away. And then I heard the sound of the freeway, like I-15 that goes through Cedar City.
Yeah.
I heard the freeway, and the freeway was making a very similar humming sound to what I had heard on the ship.
That's incredible.
Dream. So it was almost like an amplified auditory hallucination.
That's incredible.
I know. And so I still don't know what to think of that whole dream to this day, but I'm kind of intuitive, I guess. And so I was talking to my friends till about 3 o'clock in the morning. I went back to bed, and then I called my friend Nate the next morning, and I said, his name is Nate, my name is Nate. So we were both two Nathans. It's kind of crazy, but his name's
awesome.
Nate Lamb. I'm Nate Kalishaw.
Well, my son's name's Nathan, so we got 3 here in this story.
Well, anyways, I had this strange feeling. I had this feeling. It was almost like a certainty that we needed to go somewhere else other than Page, Arizona. I had this strange idea, and I called my friend, and I said, hey, why don't we head out to Rachel? I said, why don't we head out to Rachel on Extraterrestrial Highway? Let's go out there and shoot photos.
Awesome.
Capture some real decay. So I kind of, as we were driving out there, I kind of told my friend, Nate, that I had this dream, and I still didn't know what to think about it. And I said, I have a really strange feeling that something might happen on this trip. And I've had strange feelings like this before, where I had a dream that my grandmother was dying, and a month and a half later, she ended up dying the exact way I had seen it in my dream. So she was my great-grandmother, my grandmother, Iris Millette, and stuff. So I've had I trust this instinct, this intuition that I have deep down, because it becomes a certainty once I feel it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I've got something similar, and I think we kind of all do. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to sound crazy here, but the thing is, we went out to Rachel, but we went out to an old ghost town by the name of Delamar. It was an old mining camp back in the late 19th century. And we were out there taking photographs, and we were still probably 40 miles west of Area 51 off the base. And we had drones come in over the top of our heads about 2,000 feet above us. They were unmanned drones with the heavy fronts on them. They flew above us for about 15 minutes. And I actually recorded this on an iPhone, but, an iPhone's kind of a wide-angle lens, so it's still kind of hard to see. But you could see the details a little bit still in the video. I haven't uploaded that video to YouTube. If I can locate it, maybe I should. But these things circled over our heads for like 15, 20 minutes, which I just thought was the strangest thing. It's almost like they were obviously wanting us to know that they were keeping an eye on us or something, or recording us or something. It was just really weird. It's like we were still far, far away from the base, and it's like, why are they out here 40 miles away from, out in the middle of nowhere, away from Area 51? So I just thought that was the weirdest thing. But we got to Rachel, to the little alien and cafe there towards the evening. It was probably around 5 o'clock, and we ordered dinner there at the Alien. And then the day was pretty much over, and we were getting ready to wrap things up at the Alien, and we were getting ready to head back to Utah.
Yeah.
And we were heading back towards Caliente, and we were in the next valley over, heading back to Caliente, Nevada, which is on the way back to Cedar City. And when we least expected it, when I was least expecting it, we watched 4 large orange orbs come out from behind this mountain that was kind of adjacent to the highway. And right before these orbs appeared, the moon was just coming up, and it was a full moon, and it wasn't quite dark yet. It was kind of like that winter twilight.
Right.
The sky's not quite black. And so these orbs came out from behind this mountain. They went over the top of the mountain, and they went down into the valley. And so they actually maneuvered. They went up over the mountain, down into the valley, and we were flipping out by then. And I had pulled the vehicle over, and Nate was like, he's like not one of those kinds of people that believe in this stuff. He didn't know what to think of my story. He was probably skeptical. He saw these, and he was like making all kinds of noise. Like, whoa, that is like amazing. It's like, what the heck is that? So I pulled the vehicle over. I'm fumbling through a brand new camera I just barely bought that had decent video capability, which later got robbed out of my vehicle a couple of weeks later, but it was kind of sad. But it's like right when I went to push play to start recording the video of this, these things blinked out. And they vanished into like thin air. They were right above the sagebrush, probably a couple 100 feet above the sagebrush, when they just kind of blinked out. But they appeared, when they first appeared, it was like a domino effect. Like the first one turned on first, and then the second one followed like a split second later, and that's how they disappeared. So it was almost like they were following some kind of choreographed maneuver.
Incredible.
And
they seem to have some exactly. I was going to say they seem to have some intelligence to them, because they reacted to you beginning to record as well as moving along the landscape and the different angle of terrain.
Yeah, and here's the mystery to me that I don't understand. I could see through these; they were translucent, which means I could kind of see through them, and these didn't look like objects or any kind of aircraft or spacecraft or anything that could actually carry people. I could actually see through these things because they were transparent, kind of translucent.
Right.
And, that was the only time we actually saw these real close up. And they were massive. I mean, it's hard to tell exactly how big they were, but they were pretty good size. That's all I feel safe saying, because I really don't know how large they were, but they seemed pretty big at the time.
Absolutely.
Right? So after they blinked out, we were like, what happened? It's like we were surprised talking about it. It was like it had happened so quick and was gone so quick, we didn't know what to do. So we were getting ready. We were sitting there for about 15 minutes talking about it, and then we decided to start getting back on the highway, and we were heading towards Caliente. And we hadn't probably been on the highway longer than 2 minutes when I was looking out the rearview mirror, and I saw these objects reappear on the opposite end of the valley, just above the highway back towards Rachel. So this was December, and there was nobody else in the valley. I think the whole time we were there, nobody came down the highway.
Incredible.
And, yeah, I flipped a Yui as fast as I could, and I drove 85 miles an hour. Like, in a Jeep, that's pretty fast.
Yeah.
But I was trying to catch up to these things before they disappeared again, and they just kind of stood stationary there for probably 5 minutes. And as I started to approach them, then they started to move, and they were above the mountains going towards Rachel. And as they started to move and we started to get closer, they blinked out again. And
wow.
So I hurried and pulled over the vehicle. I was like, well, what the heck? Where did they go? It was almost like they were taunting us a little bit, right?
Right.
And then they reappeared on the other end of the valley, like 8 miles away to like the south. And that was for the installation there, the military installation. You
right.
know? And so we pulled over the vehicle and we quit chasing these things because we realized we probably wouldn't be able to catch up to them. And I was trying to capture footage this whole time, and I couldn't capture. It was like they were blinking out even then when I was trying to capture footage and stuff. And we chased them. I kept on chasing them for a while. We were probably in that valley for about 30 minutes watching these things, 30 to 40 minutes.
Was there any sound associated with them?
Huh?
Was there any sound whatsoever associated with them?
No. In fact, when you're watching the video on YouTube, my friend tells me to shut off the car so we can see if we can hear anything. And we shut off the car, and we actually got out of the vehicle after I captured some of this footage, and we couldn't hear nothing. The whole time we were watching this thing, we couldn't hear nothing.
Incredible.
So it was absolutely silent. And, I've had people tell me that all I saw out there were orange orbs because they were doing these red flag exercises and blah, blah, blah. People can believe what they want to believe, but I know what I saw, and I know that flares don't maneuver.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if this was alien. I don't know if this was some kind of military hologram. It's possible that maybe they were testing some kind of weird hologram technology and they wanted to fool with us a little bit and toy with us. I don't know, but whatever it was, I know it wasn't orange flares.
Absolutely. It seems to be similar to their Phoenix Lights explanation, huh?
Yes, and I've gone out there. You know, 2 or 3 times a year, and I've never seen anything out there. Since August, I've probably gone out there about 7 times now since last August because of the UFO Fest, because of the opportunity to go back out there. We've become really good friends because of this festival. I've become really good friends with Pat of the Little Alien. She's the one that owns the Little Alien out there. She's one of our official vendors and sponsors, and so she's working with us. And we did a radio show out there with Southern Utah's KSUV about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, maybe. And it was a good experience. I had a lot of fun. But this past August, I went to Dulce twice. I was in Dulce, New Mexico, once on the way to Santa Fe, and once leaving Santa Fe. First time I went through there was my first time ever through Dulce. I usually go through Cuba and New Mexico when I'm coming back to the Four Corners region, but I'm not a stranger to New Mexico. I go to New Mexico several times a year. And me and my brother, this is another story that happened after the scenario out in southern Nevada. We were going to Indian Market. I don't know if you're familiar with Indian Market in Santa Fe that happens every August.
No, I'm not.
Okay, there's about 1,000 to 1,500 different native artisans from around the United States and Canada that actually converge in Santa Fe, and they host Indian Market, and it's allegedly the biggest art market that Santa Fe ever has any time of the year. So this is a massive thing that happens, and we go every other year because our company we sell stone to stone carvers, native stone carvers, and I've spent most of my life, networking with Indian people. Last 10 years I've spent my life, networking, and I spent a lot of time on the reservation. I go out to Hopi Land, I go out to the Pueblos in New Mexico. This past summer I was in Taos. I was visiting with my friends in Taos, New Mexico. And, as a result of my photography, I have a lot of Indian people that follow my work on Instagram. So I'm probably going to end up couch surfing on the res when I go on this Kickstarter trip.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because I've got a lot of friends out there, and I have a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, that goes down to have a soup fight with me every other year. And, I probably shouldn't talk about him. But anyways, I have to be careful what I say on a program or on the air, because I'm going to speak in general, in a general sense, because I'm not one of those guys that really cares about. For the longest time, I've spent my life literally outing, I guess what you could call them, New Age frauds, people who exploit and steal Native culture. And so I have a really big problem with people who are kind of like culture vultures. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that. I think we run into too many people that don't necessarily study something but claim that it's their own.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you want to know where I became convinced that I was convinced that these things were real before I had these experiences, but I became convinced of the phenomenon from talking to and hearing a lot of stories and networking with a lot of indigenous people around the desert Southwest. So I know for a fact that this stuff predates Columbus. This stuff predates.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this stuff has had a presence here in the desert Southwest, and all suddenly here in Western society, we're just all suddenly calling it a phenomenon, but it was a normal thing prior to Western colonialism here in the Southwest. So it wasn't anything new to Indian people. Maybe they act kind of amused that we create so much fanfare out of it. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But we were over in Dulce on our way to Indian Market, And I don't know if you remember last August when it seemed to be raining the entire month.
Yes.
I don't know if it was. Yeah, it was drizzling the whole time we were over in New Mexico, and it hadn't changed when we went into Dulce. Do you know anything about Dulce, New Mexico, about the history there?
Absolutely. We actually did an episode on Dulce and underground bases.
Yeah, so we were actually listening. Me and my brother, we've always kind of thought Phil Schneider was kind of crazy. We thought Phil Schneider was kind of crazy, and we would listen to him for entertainment purposes. It was kind of amusing, but I didn't really know for sure if I believed his story or not. I still don't know for sure if I believe his story, but I would listen to him for kicks, just for entertainment, kind of like talk radio or something, right?
Right.
And I had him pre-recorded on my iPhone. You don't get hardly any cell coverage. I didn't get any cell coverage through there, so we were just listening to Phil Schneider like a couple of days before we got to Dulce, because I wanted my brother to get a little bit of an education about this area, and I expressed interest in Dulce simply because it's the UFO hotspot in the desert Southwest. So it was like, we went camping there. We set up a tent there one night on our way to Indian Market, and I was joking around to my brother about seeing something in the sky because I didn't think it would actually happen. Okay. And we were setting up the tent in this rainstorm, and we set up the rain fly, and it was raining and drizzly all night, right?
Right.
And this is an oversized tent. This probably fit like 7 people. We only had 2 of us sleeping in there. And we had this load of rock that we were taking to Santa Fe. We were going to sell about 4 ton of stone in Santa Fe. This carving alabaster is what we call it. It's a favorite. It's kind of you can get more detail out of it than what most artists can get out of like marble. So it's a really amazing stone. But we were taking this stuff to sell at Indian Market, and we had the tent set up, and I was pretty exhausted, and my brother was pretty exhausted. So, we fell asleep. Probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up because I heard something above the tent. And when I woke up, I saw what looked like gigantic, oversized fireflies moving above the tent. But I could not see it directly because these lights were, whatever it was diffused because of the tent screen, the rain fly.
Right.
And we had the front zipper of our door open partially so you could see into the sky. You could see outside. And so I could see a little bit of a slit, maybe like a 20-degree slit or so. And these things disappeared about a minute later. Whatever it was dancing around. I remember like 3 objects, 3 light sources that were moving around. And then they kind of disappeared. And then I watched this one, and I couldn't see through the tent screen, but I was following this source of light. And it came out from behind my head, from behind a tent. And I as I watched it, this diffused light through the tent, I saw it appear through this slit in the tent. And it was really close. This was really close. And I can describe it in detail because it was so close.
Was it like within 10 feet or
what?
Was it like 10 feet or 15
no,
feet?
No, I would say it was like a mile away.
Okay.
But it was so big. It was so big. The moon was out that night. The moon was out this night. And I encourage you to challenge my story here. I mean, this sounds crazy, but I'm not even sure. This could be a manufactured memory. Who knows? I could be wrong on this. But look up the dates for Indian Market in 2014 and look up a couple days before that. And I'm just going on memory here, but I remember the moon being out. I remember it being kind of light outside, right?
Okay.
So I'm just going on memory here. And I remember this object appearing in front, and it actually slowed down. It was going fast, but as it was in front of the tent, it actually slowed down, and it tilted on its side. So it was flat at first, and I couldn't see the shape then. But when it tilted, it was rotating like a wagon wheel, and it was a triangular-shaped object.
What?
It was a triangular-shaped object, and it was rotating kind of like a wagon wheel.
That's incredible.
In the sky. And how do I know it was rotating like a wagon wheel? Because I could see this black object against these lighter clouds, right?
Right.
And out of each corner of this object was a deeply embedded white light. Out of each corner of this triangle, there was this deep white light. And it wasn't like super bright. It was more like, it was kind of like muffled. It was like a muffled light, like kind of like a dimmed light a little bit.
Right.
But this thing rotated, and as I was watching this thing rotated, as it was rotating, it went flat back on, horizontal to the earth again, and then it went up into the clouds.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and here's the tricky part. Okay? When I was watching the orbs, I knew that was reality, right?
Yep.
But the whole time that I had this experience, I'm going to disappoint you a little bit here. The whole time I thought I was having this experience, I thought it was a dream. I thought when I woke up the next morning, it impressed me that it was a dream, not reality.
That's incredible. Well, it sounds like being so vivid that would, I don't know. I mean, I haven't had something so close and so incredible, so I can completely understand how the mind would want to understand it in that way, because we just don't see stuff like that every day.
Yeah. But in the dream, I remember trying to wake my brother, and, I was trying to shake him and wake him up, and I remember he wouldn't wake up in the dream, right? And so, because he didn't wake up, I thought this had to be just a dream, I mean, a vision, or just my imagination, right?
Right.
And so I told my brother this story, and I said, look, I had this weird dream last night. I just stuck with that, because I didn't know for sure or not. And I'm a pretty, I go into those kind of details, but we went to Indian Market the next day for the next couple days, and we were selling rock there. And my brother would man the rock trailer, and I'm the one that knows most of the customers and most of the Indian people there at the market. And so I was spending most of my days visiting people at the market there. And, my brother joined me up on one of these Indian Market days, and we went and talked to a friend of mine by the name of Ishko Dugai. Believe it or not, he's Hickory Apache. And guess where he comes from?
Where?
He comes from Dulce, New Mexico. That's where he grew up.
Really?
So, yeah. So we were visiting. He's an amazing artist. He's kind of an abstract artist. But we were talking to Ish, and I started telling him my story about what had happened to what I had seen out there, either in reality or a dream. And I was telling Ish, I was saying, I don't know if this was reality or if it was just my imagination, just my subconscious or something. And my brother cut in right then. You know what my brother said?
What?
He said, Nate, you did try waking me up. And so he said I had tried to shake him, and my brother he confirmed that he told me that he didn't want to wake up. He wasn't, he just couldn't do it because he was so exhausted. So
Right.
He didn't want to wake up. I guess he's a deep sleeper or something, but to me that confirmed the reality of the story, whether it could in fact have been a real experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is some potential reality with his confirmation.
So I don't know. There's a lot of other things that I don't that I don't see as being equivalent to this phenomenon. But I was at UFO Congress, and I hung out with Stanton Friedman for like 3 hours.
Oh,
guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he's coming to the Utah UFO Fest, by the way. So is Travis Walton, and I don't know if you know anyone by the name of Yvonne Smith.
Yes, I do, actually. I actually talked to a gentleman who worked with Yvonne through more on the ghost and demonology side, but one of her understudies.
Yeah, she wanted to do some work with me based on these experiences that I had, and she was asking me, she says, are you ready to know more about this reality than you may be prepared to see or experience? I was like, maybe. I was a little standoffish because I've never had an offer like that, but she's she's coming to speak at the Utah UFO Fest, and I'm thinking maybe I might let my guard down a little bit and trust her a little bit and see what kind of rabbit she pulls out of a hat.
Absolutely, yeah, that's incredible, and she's got a decent resume, a decent body of work to back up everything. So if I was in your shoes, I'd definitely take that opportunity for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I met her and her assistant, and he's a really cool guy, and they're both, I guess, coming to the Utah UFO Fest. But
now, speaking of the UFO Fest, just before we get too much further ahead, when is that?
It is August 19th through the 22nd.
Excellent.
The first day we are doing a caravan out to Rachel. That's the opening of the fest. So it's like, think of it as a camping caravan out to Rachel, Nevada /Star Party. So we're going out and we're going to hang around the Alien for the first night of the fest. And that's kind of where we're jump-starting things. And then on Thursday, that next morning, all day, we're doing a UFO sci-fi type cult classic movie fest. We're here at the local Cedar Theater, the historic theater here. We're showing old 1950s flying saucer movies.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we've got like one of the potential movies we're going to be exhibiting is Earth versus the Flying Saucers. So it's going to be kind of funny, but Friday and Saturday are kind of like our big events. And originally we were only going to do about, a certain amount of speakers on one day, which is going to be Saturday. But we had so many people step up to the plate to come to our festival while I was down at UFO Congress. It's like we came up with about 14 speakers who are coming to the Utah UFO Fest. And I got to get all those people on the roster. We have Jim Mann and Stacy Wright of the Arizona Phoenix-based MUFON. He's the director of Arizona MUFON. They're coming up here. And we've got Erica Lukes from Salt Lake. She's gonna be here. But we got Stanton Friedman, Travis Walton, Yvonne Smith. I don't know if you know Daryl Sims.
Yes.
Yes, he expressed interest in coming. And then we have Chris O'Brien.
Really?
I'm expert.
I am extremely impressed with Chris O'Brien's work.
Yeah, he's coming. And then we have Clifford Mahooty of the Zuni. He's going to be here in Cedar City, and we also have the Navajo Rangers coming up here to do a presentation.
That's awesome. I've heard some stories. I've got a friend of mine. Are you familiar with Ryan Burns?
I'm not.
He actually lives out in Duchesne. He wrote a book called Skinwalker and Beyond. He moved out there in the late 90s after having a Skinwalker experience of his own and basically put together this book and has had continued experiences out at that area. So,
well, you know what's funny is people look at this subject as like people who don't believe in this stuff or who think it's kind of questionable. They look at us like we're a bunch of just people they don't want to associate with or something. So you get this weird taboo or this weird strangeness about people who don't want to associate with anything on this or anyone on this topic. And I find that ludicrous, but not beyond expectation. I've come to expect this. You know why?
Why?
Because we live in a secular society that has taught people to question everything. Anytime science can't explain something, it sweeps it underneath the rug or writes it off as an anomaly. And I think it's a distorted, I know this sounds crazy, but I think I think science is very limited in its vision, which makes science itself, in a lot of ways, slanted. And I would argue that Native Americans, that a lot of Native First Nations, that members of these Native Indian nations, were better observers of the natural world than I would say even our Western scientists.
Absolutely. I would completely agree with that.
Yeah, because when you're discussing this stuff around a lot of these Indian communities, they don't laugh at you, they don't scoff at you, they don't ridicule you, Yet in Western culture, you have these ethnobotanists and these academics they're claiming to have PhDs and experts on cultures and worldwide. Some of these people get hired by organizations like these pharmaceutical companies, and they send these people out into these indigenous communities to get their knowledge, their indigenous knowledge. Like, for example, there was somewhere in Africa where, like, one of these pharmaceuticals sent an individual out, or a group of individuals who were ethnobotanists, and they were discovering how these people were, like, getting cured of, like, Lou Gehrig's disease and Alzheimer's disease. Like, how are these guys getting cured, right? Well, it turns out that there was, like, some kind of neurotoxin that was going through this community from the food that they were eating, and they traced this neurotoxin to this strange fungus that grows in the root of these trees that they were eating the fruit from. So the neurotoxin actually was transferred from this fungus into the tree and into the fruit, and there was a high rate of Lou Gehrig's disease, Alzheimer's, and all those related diseases. And they noticed that these people weren't getting any sicker. You know what I'm saying? There was some kind of medicine that they were taking that was part of this indigenous knowledge. And these companies went in there and they found out what was counteracting this neurotoxin that was causing this potential Lou Gehrig's disease. And, I don't know what happened after that, but I know that a lot of these indigenous medicines get stolen. We're talking cultural exploitation here, where there's this cultural knowledge that belongs to that community, and a large corporation comes in and steals that knowledge and doesn't give these people any credit or any kind of intellectual rights over this discovery, right?
Right.
And this has happened, and I excuse my ignorance on that story. I'm just recalling it from memory, so I'm sure you're gonna have to do some research into that. But I know it had really happened, and but there's been this exploitation by Western culture. Like, we're talking anthropologists, even sociologists. Sociologists are guilty of it too. And, I learned about this, firsthand. I think you're getting a basic gist of my critique here. So I won't go any further into that. I just want to make one more statement.
Absolutely.
The problem, the reason why I take issue with a lot of New Agers, not because I'm against the New Age movement or whatever they want to believe. I'm only against people who don't have any respect for these Indian communities or their belief systems, and then they take these things out of context, either because they're some wannabe or they're trying to make money or something because they know it'll sell. And so they pervert and they bastardize whatever it is, what little they know, and then they try to profit off of it. And in a lot of traditional cultures, that is seen as downright black magic or whatever you want to call it. It's deeply frowned upon because, and I warn people coming here to the Southwest to visit these national parks who are interested in Indian cultures and stuff, I tell them, beware of any kind of book that purports to be knowledgeable about Native spirituality, because in most cases, in most likelihood, that book is probably fraudulent. It's probably not actual. Something was exploited in order for that book to be published.
Absolutely.
And the Hopi people in Arizona have been so heavily exploited by these New Agers that they've actually closed all their ceremonies and everything. And not just that, but by anthropologists as well. I had a friend of mine who was Lakota. He described this as this New Age movement stealing these native religions. He described it as backdoor assimilation. He says, look, they took everything we had. These colonizers took everything that we had left, and now they're coming into the back door and stealing what we've got left. So that's the way he described it. But that's kind of off topic. I just wanted to kind of get that out there. I want this festival.
It's still relevant if you ask me, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I think that there is a lack of understanding, a disconnect, if you will, for the appreciation in what they have learned previous to us being here. And I think that there's a complete lack of respect for everything that we've benefited from.
Not only that, but I mean, it's a complete disregard. And ignorance is okay, but willful ignorance is in my book, cruelty.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, if people are doing this inadvertently and they don't realize they're harming a culture, exploiting it, well, then there's room for education. But if they're still blatantly belligerent, I guess is the word, then, you know, then it's not a good thing. So,
Absolutely.
you know, I've spent all this time on the res, and, you know, it's kind of interesting because as an artist, my whole Kickstarter surrounds this whole topic. You know, as an artist, I noticed that I love. I don't know if you've ever heard of Edward Abbey.
Yeah.
The writer. He's an amazing writer. I loved his writings. He was very talented. He wrote a book called Desert Solitaire. He wrote The Monkey Ranch Gang, and I loved what he wrote about. And his descriptive imagery is just mind blowing. But he was also very racist, and he would often talk about Indian people here in the Southwest like they were the litter of the Southwest or something. And it's like there was a complete disregard there. But, you know, what's funny is I really dived into the environmental rhetoric and a lot of the literature from like Victorian nature writers.
Right.
And they made it sound like the more I read this information, the more they sounded like nobody was here before Columbus. I was like, this is kind of funny because this sounds a lot like Manifest Destiny.
Right.
I kept on seeing parallels here. And you know what? I came to the conclusion that a lot of this environmental rhetoric has been carried over from the Manifest Destiny doctrine. It's like, holy moly! It's just, you know, some people spout this. They show their ignorance by spouting this rhetoric. And I go to correct them afterwards, and they're like, it's like a complete revelation what I'm telling them, and and so there's this mentality, and I'm not saying environmentalists are bad or they're racist because of this. What I'm saying is there needs to be some reform within that movement. There needs to be some decolonizing even within the environmental movement. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So, you know, and I kind of understand the plight of these ranchers too, because I grew up around a lot of conservative ranchers, and I share a lot of their politics, but I try to be open-minded of both left and right-wing discussions because, you know, really, the tyrant is not the liberals. The tyrant is not the Republicans. You want to know who the real tyrant is? It's the one who's employing the same exact colonial divide and conquer tactics that they did towards these Indian nations. They're now doing to all the American people. They're dividing us left and right because if we can't work together, we're a broken system. We're a house divided, and therefore we're blaming the right wingers are blaming the liberals for this oppression, and the liberals are blaming the Tea Partiers for this oppression, and it's actually the powerful people behind the curtain and the corporations behind that curtain that are actually causing this disharmony, this division. And so that's the real tyrant, but we're too caught up in these minuscule politics to really know who our real enemy is.
Absolutely. A big tornado of disinformation.
Yes. And so as an artist, I'm going on this journey to, you know, intentionally add. I noticed something that was even funnier is if you go to a lot of these photography forums, there's this meticulous detail where they want to cut out, you know, it's really kind of tedious. They want everything to look pristine in the photograph. There's this huge group of nature photographers and landscape photographers that can't have anything man-made in their landscapes. They can't have the contrails in the sky. They can't have the power line. They have to go out there and move that piece of garbage out of the way. And there's a famous photographer down here that's known for natural light. His name is Michael Fatali, but every one of his images looks like it was on another planet because there's no sign of human interaction with the environment. And I noticed this. I mean, I love his photography. Don't get me wrong. I love his photography, but I'm critiquing a whole entire group of photographers here. I'm saying they're espousing the same belief in a false construct of pristine wilderness, and I've been violating that construct for the last 5 years. I've been educating people through my photography and through my work through a simple means of adding the human culture into the environment and showing that we are not inseparable. No matter how much we want to think we're separate from the environment, we were conceived here on the planet. Maybe we're star people, I don't know. But, we've been a part of this environment for a long time, and you can't just cut out humanity out of that picture.
Absolutely.
It's a false construct.
Absolutely. And I think, like I said earlier, you do a really great job. You have a wonderful perspective, and it is a refreshing thing to see some uncommon images or things within the image that you don't typically see within a landscape. And like I said, it's refreshing. It's definitely nice to see something a little less than predictable.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm going to continue this work for the rest of my life. So I don't deviate from this vision. And actually, in all circumstances and all experiences that I've had, I believe that I was called to do this work. Photography kind of chose me, and then the friends that I crossed paths with reinforced this opinion that I've developed, this belief that I've developed, that I'm on this path for a reason, because I'm not any better than anybody else, like in my community or where I come from. Just because I have knowledge and I know more about a lot of stuff like this doesn't necessarily make me better than anybody. I'm not an elitist here. I'm not going to act like I'm better than anybody. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I came up with, I realized that I've got a responsibility as a human being, as a non-Indian, as a human being in Western culture. I believe I have a responsibility to my community and to my country to educate people and help our country and our communities to decolonize from this mindset, And I don't think a lot of Native Americans, I don't think they want sympathy from non-Indians. I don't think they want that. I think they want empathy, and they're disgusted when people show too much sympathy, and it just shows their ignorance.
Absolutely.
I think what a lot of Native people want are friendships, human to human friendships, and they don't want to be distinguished as exotic others or mystical noble indigenous peoples. They don't want to be treated like that. They want to be treated like you and I. There's an understanding there, but there's a serious disconnect too. And I've heard I've had friends refer to me as a relative, maybe kind of like the coyote or the raven or something, but I've never had a desire to be Indian or to, I'm glad that God made me, that the Creator made me who I am and stuff. And I've seen a lot of struggles on the res. I've seen a lot of the reality out there. And I think it would be a really hard, difficult life. But I'm not going to say it's absolutely miserable. I've seen people having good times out, and there are people that love the reservation life, and there are people that it's a real struggle for. So it just depends on who you are. But for the longest time, I didn't realize how much of a collectivist culture the Navajo people are. It wasn't until recent times that I realized that you're expected to. Like if you were in that community, you remember that community, you're expected to give something back. If you're wealthy, it was an expectation of you to share that wealth with people who didn't have the same kind of luxuries or blessings, And if you didn't share those things, you would have to be, people would be suspicious that maybe you were some kind of witch or some kind of skinwalker.
Interesting.
So it's like, huh?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Our most recent episode was actually, we did one on time travel, but the one before that was on skinwalkers, so it's all tying in.
Yeah, you know what? I hear these funny debates going on about how these paranormal ghost hunters don't want to mix with all these UFO fanatics and vice versa. Bigfoot. You got your Bigfoot researchers and all that. I kind of think that a bunch of these people are just enthusiasts. They're not really researchers, because I think a researcher, a general researcher, has to look at everything. You have to look at sociology. You have to look at anthropology. You You have to learn about Indian people and build friendships with them by going out to those communities. You can't learn about a culture from books. You go out and make friendships, But you become an observer and you experience things, and that's how I really think you gain knowledge, is by experiencing things. Like a couple summers ago, I followed in the footsteps of Geronimo. I was down in Arizona, and I had read about the history of the Chiricahua Apache, and so I went on like an 8,000-mile road trip just in Arizona for like a month, and I went into the Chiricahua Mountains, and I followed in the footsteps of Geronimo and his warriors, into the Chiricahua Mountains. I went around that area, went to Fort Bowie, and I could feel the spiritual forces, the powerful forces of that mountain in those areas where he had walked. And I'm not trying to put him on a pedestal, but what I'm saying is that there was a very powerful force to be reckoned with out there. And I remember going into certain areas, and you know how I was telling you about that intuition earlier?
Yeah.
It was telling me to get the heck out of there, that I wasn't supposed to be in there. So do you think I was taking pictures in there? No. I put my camera away, and I scoot and boogied on out of there, and I showed respect. There's certain things I won't photograph, and there's certain things I leave alone, and so, and maybe sometimes if you and I are meeting up in person, I can share a few experiences that I can't share over here over the show or on the podcast, but, because I've learned how to have respect for maybe things that are considered that may not be sacred to me, but might be considered sacred to other people.
Absolutely.
And so I have to kind of use my own personal discretion here the best way I can, but I'm kind of a storyteller, so I got to keep myself in check a little bit.
Well, you do a great job, so I'm entertained, and I'm pretty sure that the listeners will be entertained as well. And speaking of the listeners, how can the listeners get involved with your Kickstarter project?
Okay, well, we've got about 15 days left. Actually, it was shown as 16, but tomorrow, what's the date tomorrow?
Tomorrow will be the 6th of March.
Okay, so on the 6th of March, we'll be at 15 days left, at the 15-day mark on this campaign. So they've got the next 2 weeks to, look for the project on Kickstarter. They can use I've got a short link if they can write this down. It's www.tinyurl.com/Southwest Adventure, as one word, Southwest Adventure. So if they follow that short link, it goes right to the Kickstarter campaign.
Excellent. I will definitely link that in the show notes as well. So if anybody is interested, check out the show notes. Do you have a personal page or any way that we can get a hold of you, or if any listeners want to help with the UFO Fest or learn more about that?
Here's the thing. I use social media on a more of a professional level, which means I don't care who sends me friend requests. So I usually approve all friend requests on Facebook. So if you want to send me a friend request on Facebook, I'm totally cool with that. I will accept it, unless you look like a freaky, scary person that wants to, get what I'm saying? But I'm a pretty nice guy, and if you go to Instagram, if you're on Instagram, you can direct message me, and I'll probably see it. And if you direct message me and you tell me you heard me on this podcast or whatever, let me know, and I'll follow you back even. So
awesome.
I network with a lot of people in my community, and I really care about my community, and because they've helped me get to where I'm at right now. I wouldn't be at $8,500 on my Kickstarter if I was a recluse.
Well, I'm right there with you, man. I definitely know the value of appreciating, the audience or the customer, or, in this case, the friends, because I share a passion in music and audio the same way you share passion with photography. So,
well, I have a passion for audio as well and music, but I don't. I play a few instruments, but those are a few sleeves. Those are a few secrets I'll keep up my sleeve. I try to keep a poker face on certain things.
Well, good. Actually, we'll have to sit around a campfire and play a few hands.
Tyler, are you coming down to the UFO Fest?
I'm there. I'm absolutely there. I've already put in for work, so I'm there. And if there's anything else I can do to help, definitely let me know, and Odd Reality Radio is here to help along the way too. I'd like to put together a little audio radio ad somewhat and put that at the first of every episode until we get the actual UFO Fest here.
Okay, that sounds great. And I think what we want right now, what we're looking for, is we need a lot of vendors.
Excellent.
So we have a vending fee of about $75, which I think is pretty conservative.
It's not bad at all.
They have to have their own insurance, and we're kind of juried, so we don't have anything set up to the website yet for vendors. So if they're interested, they need to just contact me directly.
Excellent.
Or text me or whatever. And they're free. You're free to share my phone number too.
Okay.
So that's fine.
Excellent. So if anybody is interested, definitely get a hold of me. You can email us here at the show at info@oddrealityradio.com, and I'll pass along the message.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Nathan, for taking time out of your schedule, the very busy schedule as it is, and I hope to talk to you here in the near future about the UFO Fest.
Thank you, Tyler. Thanks for having me on here.
Excellent. Take care.